Hi there, Eric Backer, naturopath, author of Candida Crusher, back to you again with another video. This time I'm going to talk to you about children's yeast infections. So I'm talking mainly not so much babies or toddlers or infants. I'm talking about a little bit older, probably say 4 or 5 up to about 13, 14 years of age is an age I commonly see with yeast infection. So how do you know a child that age has got a yeast infection? How can you diagnose a yeast infection with a younger person? Well, there are different ways we can do that. We can do stool testing. You know, we've got different tests. You can read about those in my book, Candida Crusher book. But I don't generally have to do that with a child. I can usually see that by the behaviour and by the cravings and the presentations. It's the signs and symptoms will usually dictate what's going on there. Now, you may find that a bit presumptuous or say, Eric, how can you do that? You're not medically qualified. You're not diagnosing. How the heck can you say it's a yeast infection based on what you're seeing and treating it? Well, I can tell you now, clinical observation is the gold standard, according to a professor of medicine a few years ago in America. When you get quite experienced in the clinic, you start realizing that you don't need to have paralysis from analysis all the time. You don't need to damn well test every single thing that comes through the door. It's expensive. And sometimes a test can even be wrong and put you on the wrong track. What won't deceive you is your own eyes and your own experience. And generally you'll find that by working on that sixth sense or that hunch that you get and treating and then seeing the clinical result, you're going to get a lot of positive feedback or negative feedback. You're going to know if you're on the right track or not. Now you may think that's placebo effect. I don't really care what you think. All I care about is the agreement I have with my patient, okay? Patient comes in, pays me a fee, is looking for a result. I'm going to try and work to give that patient that result. End of. So let's move on. We've got that out of the way. With the children, I tend to look very carefully at the desire for sugar. Now you may, if you're an older person, know a bit about Dr. Ben Feingold's work back in the 70s on identifying colorings and flavorings with children and working out that certain food colors, certain preservatives created behavioral disturbances in children. This is quite important, groundbreaking early work by a physician who identified some core chemicals in foods that could actually affect the behavior of a person. Feingold went on to do a lot of work, I believe, in the prison system, and was quite useful, helping institutions out on correcting and modifying behaviour based on his observations with food. What alarms me today with young people is the amazing amount of soda drinks and energy drinks that young people have in their diets. Litres and litres of this stuff a week, laced with caffeine, laced with taurine, laced with sugars, laced with all these colours and sodium benzoate and caramel and all this crap in these drinks that kids are drinking, affecting their mood, their behaviour, their gut function. All these phosphates that they're taking in to ruin their stomach and pancreatic function. We're seeing an alarming incidence increase in pancreatic cancers. We're seeing a big increase in autism. We're seeing a big increase in a whole raft of problems. So, one of the first things I look at is the consumption of soda drinks. That's a key thing. I look at also the consumption of specific foods. We had a patient only about 4 or 5 days ago now. A lady brought me this boy, about 8 years old, with major behavioural problems, incredible behavioural problems. I had him in my room here. He was pulling all the books off the shelves. He was banging my guitar and he was grabbing some plants I've got, and he was really out of control. And the poor mum, the mum is separated, which usually happens from their partner when the child's got massive behavioural issues. But when I questioned the mother about the diet, the child was having up to 2 kilos of cheese per week. That's 2,000 grams of cheese a week and 5 bananas a day. And the mother thought this to be quite good because these were healthy foods. So you can clearly see how some people have distorted views on what healthy really is. This child wasn't having a lot of sweet stuff, but the bananas were a key thing underpinning this here. Bananas are quite a sugar, starchy food. So I look for these strong aberrations, these strong changes in behaviour and the desires that the child will have. But more than anything, I look at the behavioural change that happens to the child when the caregiver takes this food or drink away. And that can be quite dramatic. In some cases, I've heard mums telling me that windows were smashed or chairs were thrown through walls when foods were omitted. After a week, the child went out of control. So this tells you how these foods can really affect the brain and the gut. So if you've got a child with a very powerful desire for a sweet food or a very powerful desire for allergenic food, you could have a real problem on your hands when that child is an adolescent and even an out of control child. So what foods am I talking about? Well, bananas is one, dairy products, cheese, cream, ice cream, cow's milk, peanuts, oranges, all citrus fruit apart from lemons, chocolate, sugary foods, and in some cases wheat and gluten. But I'm not a real big believer in this whole gluten hypothesis that gluten is, is Satan. Gluten is bad for everybody. Everyone would be better without gluten. I think it's a load of BS. I don't really buy that. And I'll talk on some other videos about this gluten theory that I have. But I believe sugary foods, high fructose corn syrup, these sorts of sweet things, we really need to be careful with these with children because these things can very often underpin a yeast infection, particularly when a child has had recurrent antibiotics. It can really cause a lot of problems. So if you're a mother or father watching this video with a child who's got A, bad behaviour or behaviour you can't control, B, a strong desire for soda drinks or sweet food, or C, a very strong desire for an allergenic food, which I outlined before, the key allergenic foods, you could be having a real problem on your hands. Even more so if you take this child to the doctor and they get put on antibiotics, is then you're going to wipe out a lot of bacteria and allow yeast to proliferate in the gut. So that's something that you really need to pay attention to. So I hope this video has been of use today and that it may help you, with a child. You can also read a bit more about children and yeast infections in my book, Candida Crusher, and certainly do my online course. You'll get a free, very handy Candida shopping guide if you sign up for that course. So thank you for your time.